She bulldozed history. My grandfather's tunnel, built with his own hands, protected by federal law, reduced to rubble. And when I stood there, watching her sip iced tea like she hadn't just destroyed a legacy, I knew this wasn't going to end with a fine or an apology. This was going to end with her name etched into the failure she tried to bury me with. This is the story of how I calmly took everything back, and made sure she'd never do it again. Hello everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Every day, I share fascinating real-life stories with you. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, so you never miss the most meaningful moments. And today, I have another touching story to tell. Enjoy listening. You ever hear glass shatter in total silence? That was how it started. One second, I'm sitting at my desk, windows open, typing up an invoice for a client. The next, there's this delicate tink, followed by a low hiss, like someone inhaling through clenched teeth, and then the sharp crash of glass raining down onto tile. It wasn't cinematic. No slow motion. Just fast, ugly reality. I stared at the floor. A rock the size of a fist, wrapped in newspaper, lay in the middle of my kitchen, surrounded by shards of what used to be my front window. The wind pushed through the gap, fluttering the curtains like flags waving surrender. But I didn't move. Didn't rush to clean it up. Didn't even touch the rock. I just stood there, breathing through my nose, letting the pressure behind my eyes settle. Because I knew exactly who did it. And I knew this was only the beginning. Let me rewind. My name's Michael. 38. Freelance architect. The kind of person people describe as quiet, or calm, often followed by, but you never really know what he's thinking. That's fair. I don't like drama. I don't like confrontation. I don't raise my voice unless it's absolutely necessary. I live alone, which suits me just fine. Or at least it did. 2 years ago, I moved into a small house on the edge of an older neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just a modest one-story with a garden out back and space for my dog, Franklin. Quiet street, mostly retirees and a few younger couples trying to escape the rising costs of downtown. It was, by all appearances, a peaceful place. But looks lie. 3 houses down lived Janet. Janet. That name will probably mean nothing to you. But in our neighborhood, it had the same effect as nails on a chalkboard. A recently retired lawyer, mid-60s, sharp as a tack and twice as venomous. She ran the HOA like a private militia and carried her clipboard like a badge of honor. You could always hear her before you saw her, the sharp click of orthopedic heels on concrete, the controlled tone of a person who thinks they've never lost an argument. She wasn't cruel in the way you see in movies, she didn't scream or throw things. She was something worse, relentlessly polite. Weaponized courtesy. A master of passive-aggressive warfare. Our first interaction was about my mailbox. "This isn't regulation height," she said, smiling like she was offering me a cookie. I'd only just moved in. I wasn't aware there was a regulation. There is. Page 17 of the HOA handbook. She held it out, tabbed and color-coded. "It's easily fixable. I'll give you a week." I nodded. Thanked her. Fixed it that weekend. I figured that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Next came the garbage cans, not fully behind the fence line. Then the lawn, not mowed diagonally, which apparently was an aesthetic preference outlined in subsection 3b. Then the wind chimes my sister gave me, auditory disruption, during quiet hours. At first I complied. Why stir up unnecessary trouble? I'd always believed people like Janet eventually got bored if you didn't feed the fire. But she didn't get bored. She escalated. Letters. Notes on my door. Anonymous complaints, except they weren't anonymous, because she always signed them in her perfect looping cursive, like a signature on a lawsuit. And the tone of them, it was always just this side of civil. Concern for the neighborhood. Committed to uniform standards. That sort of thing. She wanted control, and when she realized I wouldn't fight her for it, she mistook it for weakness. That was her mistake. Back to the rock. It was the first act of outright aggression. No note. No explanation. Just broken glass and the cold stare of, "I dare you." I didn't call the police. Not yet. Because calling the police only works when the system wants to help. And people like Janet? They know how to dance through the rules like they're part of the choreography. Instead, I installed cameras. Not the obvious kind. Subtle. A few above the door, 2 camouflaged in the flower beds, and 1 inside a fake birdhouse facing the street. I wanted proof. Not just suspicion. Evidence. Because I knew she wasn't done. And sure enough, within a week she returned. This time, it wasn't a rock. It was poison. Not for me, for Franklin. My dog. I came home from the store to find him collapsed on the floor, panting, eyes glazed. Rushed him to the vet. They found traces of pesticide in his system, mixed into a piece of raw meat. Someone had tossed it over the fence. Franklin survived. Barely. And that was the moment the switch flipped. Something inside me went quiet. Not numb. Focused. Like a red light turning green. I realized I'd spent too long waiting for someone else to fix this. Hoping she'd move on. She wasn't going to. She needed to be stopped. And not with violence. With precision. With proof. With a kind of revenge she couldn't see coming until it had her by the throat. So I started documenting. Every note. Every visit. Every word. I started watching. Listening. Learning her routine. And as I did, I began planning. She wanted control. I was going to take it from her. One measured step at a time. The thing about people like Karen is they don't believe they're wrong until the consequences are physically, undeniably in their lap, like smoke in the kitchen or blue lights in the driveway. And even then, some still won't admit it. After the bulldozer incident, I didn't sleep much. I'd lie there in the dark, not scared, not even angry, just buzzing. You know that feeling? Like your nerves are tuning forks, humming at a frequency just below rage but far beyond calm. That was me. Quiet on the outside. Inside, I was drafting war plans. The collapsed tunnel had made the local news, but that was just the beginning. What people didn't see was the slow-motion avalanche she had triggered. The investigators, the structural experts, the historical preservationists, those were the visible layers. What lay underneath, the part she couldn't see, was me. Because I'd stopped reacting emotionally. I had started documenting everything. I kept a log. A physical one. Spiral-bound, red-covered, dated like I was prepping for a deposition. I wrote down every phone call, every visit, every passive-aggressive flyer she stuffed into mailboxes. She stopped addressing things directly to me. Smart. But not smart enough to realize her new tactic, indirect pressure, was even easier to trace. She started getting others involved. First, it was the old man 2 houses down. Suddenly he was leaving bags of mulch on the edge of our yard. Accidentally. Then it was the couple across the street who started filing noise complaints anytime I so much as dragged a hose across gravel. One of the notices? Improper watering during restricted HOA hours. Mind you, we're not on city water. We have our own well. Karen was using the neighbors like chess pieces. Proxies. She was hiding behind the board she had manipulated into silence, letting others take the hit while she kept her hands supposedly clean. But what she didn't understand, what she couldn't understand, is that some people do their best thinking in the quiet. Not when they're yelling. Not when they're waving flags or clipboards. But in stillness. And that stillness was sharpening me. My grandmother took it hard. The sinkhole in the backyard had changed the rhythm of her days. She wouldn't go near the garden. Didn't even want to walk past the back porch. She just sat in her chair near the front window, like the house itself was holding its breath. Watching. Waiting. You think they'll fix it? She asked one evening, her voice smaller than usual. They have to, I said. It's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when. She nodded but didn't look convinced. So I doubled down. I called the state's preservation office again and asked to escalate. Then I requested a copy of every legal filing related to the tunnel, past and present. I contacted the Army Corps historian and asked for a formal written assessment. I even went through my grandfather's old files in the attic, manila folders filled with brittle blueprints and original letters from 1952. I found one stamped with a seal I'd never seen before. Department of Civil Defense, Subterranean Safety Unit. I took a photo. Sent it to the Preservation Board with the subject line, "You may want to see this." The reply came within an hour. "This changes things. We're initiating a formal injunction." Meanwhile, Karen started acting like a mafia boss in retreat. She stopped walking the neighborhood. The clipboard disappeared. Her usual morning routine of patrolling with a travel mug and a scowl, gone. In her place, I saw a woman peering nervously from behind curtains, responding to the world like a cornered animal. And yet she still hadn't apologized. Not once. Not even a gesture toward contrition. She just retreated. And for a while, that silence was louder than any of her tantrums. But not for long. One night, after the injunction had been filed and the case had gained traction, I came home to find a letter shoved under my door. Handwritten. No envelope. One sentence. "You're making a mistake you'll regret." It wasn't signed. But it didn't have to be. I stared at that note for a long time. Turned it over in my hands like it might bleed if I squeezed hard enough. Regret? No. I felt steady. Steadier than I had in months. Because regret is a luxury you lose when someone vandalizes your history, scares your grandmother, and treats your legacy like a landscaping nuisance. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just fighting for the tunnel anymore. I was fighting for the truth to be bigger than her lies. It started small, just a quiet post on the neighborhood message board. A single sentence. "Does anyone else have questions about the recent HOA expenditures?" No name. No accusation. Just a soft tap on the wall to see who else might be listening. I didn't write it. But I knew who did. There were whispers before, scattered frustrations behind closed doors. People who had been fined for flower pots, who'd received 3-paragraph warnings about unauthorized wind chimes, who felt the chill of Karen's influence but were too polite, or too tired, to push back. That post? It was the first crack in the ice. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't smile when I saw it. Karen's power wasn't built on law. It was built on silence, on people assuming she knew what she was doing. That her rules were real. That her board, half of whom she had replaced through procedural trickery, actually had any legitimate authority. But now, with the state's investigation in full swing and the tunnel destruction gaining attention beyond our zip code, her empire of clipboards and fear was starting to wobble. I didn't need to attack her directly anymore. I just had to let the truth do its work. And the truth? It had teeth. 2 days after that anonymous message, I got an email. Then another. Then 3 more. One neighbor sent me a copy of their fine history, 6 notices in 4 months, each more absurd than the last. Another told me they had been forced to repaint their door because the shade of navy blue was too nautical. A third said Karen had shown up at their door with a tape measure and tried to argue their porch steps were a 1/4 inch too steep. Petty? Yeah. But patterns don't lie. They just need someone to stitch them together. So I did. I made a digital folder. Labeled every submission. Categorized each infraction. Cross-referenced the bylaws, noted discrepancies, even color-coded the complaints by severity. It wasn't thrilling work, but it was like building a case brick by brick, and every brick had Karen's fingerprints on it. Then came the leak. Someone, still don't know who, sent me a PDF labeled HOA Expense Summary, Internal Use Only. At first, I didn't think much of it. But as I scrolled through, my stomach turned. Thousands of dollars marked. Consulting fees. Payments to companies with no addresses. A charge for infrastructure review, paid to someone who, according to a Google search, was Karen's nephew. The kicker? Line 42, private contract, debris removal, $6,800. The date? Same day the tunnel was bulldozed. I read it twice. Then a third time. then printed it out and taped it to the inside of my kitchen cabinet. Not out of vengeance. Not even out of spite. Out of resolve. Because when someone weaponizes bureaucracy to ruin lives, to manipulate others, to bulldoze history and then build the community for it, what they've built isn't leadership. It's a cult made of paper. And I was about to burn it down. Properly. Legally. Publicly. The timing couldn't have been better. The State Historical Board had scheduled a preliminary hearing. Karen was subpoenaed. Not just to attend, but to submit all relevant HOA documents. I imagine when she got that letter, she was sitting in her usual spot, sipping that sickeningly sweet iced tea she never seemed to finish. And maybe, just maybe, her hand trembled just a little when she read it. Because a hearing meant testimony. And testimony meant evidence. And I had a lot of evidence. I didn't go in with theatrics. No suit, no drama. Just a clean copy of every document, every photo, every letter, every printed email she ever sent me. The state attorney thanked me. Said I was unusually well organized for a civilian. I shrugged and said, I've had time. Karen arrived late. No clipboard this time. No blazer. She looked smaller. Not physically, just diminished. Like someone who finally realized the walls were not only closing in, but that she had built them herself. When the panel asked her why she approved demolition of a federally protected structure, her voice faltered. When they asked about the consulting firm that billed $6,000 and had no legal registration, her face twitched. When they asked if she had consulted any actual experts before ordering a bulldozer onto my property, she tried to shift blame. But there was no one left to shift it to. Her kingdom of paper was burning. Page by page. Policy by policy. All because she believed the rules made her invincible. What she didn't understand, what she never understood, is that real power doesn't come from a rulebook. It comes from standing your ground. From outlasting the storm. From staying calm long enough to let the truth bury your enemies for you. The panel adjourned. There would be follow-ups. Possible charges. A full audit. As we stepped out into the hallway, she turned to me. For the first time in months, she didn't speak. She just looked at me. And I saw it in her eyes. Not apology. Not even anger. But fear. The kind that creeps in when you realize you're not the one writing the story anymore. You're just a chapter in someone else's record. And that record was about to go public. You ever watch someone lose power in real time? It's not sudden. Not like a switch being flipped. It's slower. More human. Like watching a candle gutter out, not from wind, but because it's used up all the wax and doesn't know it's dying yet. That was Karen. After the hearing, she tried to pretend nothing had changed. She still walked the block, though she no longer stopped to chat. She'd pick up trash with the kind of exaggerated elegance that made you want to trip her. She still wore that pastel windbreaker with the HOA logo on it. But her shoulders were tighter. Her eyes darted more. And the clipboard? It was gone. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because the damage was already done. The tunnel restoration had officially been approved. A grant from the state's Cold War Education Fund came through, with more likely from the Preservation Society. And Karen? She'd been removed from all current project correspondence by court order. Her voice, once the loudest thing on the street, had been silenced by paperwork, the very thing she used to weaponize against the rest of us. The irony? Delicious. But her silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. She was waiting. Watching. Hoping that if she stayed quiet long enough, people would forget. That she could rebuild her little empire once the scandal cooled off. And maybe, in another neighborhood, that might have worked. But not here. Because what she didn't count on, what she never understood, is that people don't forget how you made them feel. And she had made a lot of people feel small. It started with a block party. The idea came from my neighbor Melissa, a teacher with 2 kids and a garden full of wild herbs. "We haven't had one since before COVID," she said, handing me a plate of brownies wrapped in parchment. "Feels like we should do something good." So we did. Potluck. Open yard. No permits. No HOA oversight. We made flyers by hand and slipped them into mailboxes. The kind of thing Karen used to fine people for. By Saturday afternoon, there were folding chairs across lawns, chalk drawings on the sidewalk, speakers hooked up to old extension cords, and kids running around with juice boxes and painted faces. And Karen? She watched from her window. Everyone saw her. No one invited her. That same week, the board met for what was supposed to be a routine budget review. I hadn't planned to go. I really hadn't. I was still tired of thinking about her, tired of fighting. But something told me I needed to be there. Turns out, it was fate. Because halfway through the meeting, a motion was raised by a board member named Janice. It was short. To vote on the removal of Karen, redacted, as HOA president, effective immediately. Someone seconded it before the sentence finished. I sat in the back, sipping from a coffee thermos, watching Karen's mouth twitch like she'd tasted something sour and didn't know whether to spit or swallow. Her voice, once firm and clipped and so certain, came out small. This is highly irregular. It's been irregular since you ordered a bulldozer, someone said. There were 7 votes. 5 voted yes. 1 abstained. Karen voted no. But it didn't matter. The motion passed. She was done. After the meeting, she didn't storm out. She didn't scream or throw anything. She stood, straightened her skirt, and walked to the back of the room where I was packing up. She paused beside me. You think you've won? She said softly. No, I replied, without looking at her. I think we stopped losing. She didn't respond. Just walked out into the hallway, the sound of her heels echoing like a eulogy. You'd think that would be the end. But narcissists don't go quietly. They file counterclaims. They draft letters to anyone who will read them. They spread rumors and whispered phone calls and carefully worded Facebook posts. Karen did all of that. She claimed I had manipulated the board. That I forged evidence. That I had violated HOA ethics by rallying dissent and undermining community unity. But no one was listening anymore. Because the documents were real. The damage was visible. The lies were too old to hide behind. And the thing about someone who always acts like they're in control? The moment they aren't, people scatter like roaches in light. Even her closest allies had gone quiet. One moved out. One claimed she had been misled. The third deleted his neighborhood app account entirely. She was alone. And suddenly, the silence she had ruled over so smugly became a prison. I got a letter 2 weeks later. Certified. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I hope your little history project was worth it. I put it in the same drawer where I kept all her other nonsense. The drawer I was saving for the Historical Society. For the record. For the book I'd one day write, even if no one else ever read it. Because in the end, she gave me something I didn't expect. Proof that silence can be broken. Proof that being calm isn't the same as being passive. And proof that no matter how deep someone buries the truth, there's always someone willing to dig it back out. Even if they have to do it by hand. I wish I could tell you it was easy after that. That the vote ended everything. That Karen vanished into the sunset and never knocked on another door again. But life isn't a fable. Villains don't just disappear. They linger. They haunt in echoes, mutterings at the grocery store, quiet resentment in passing glances, little reminders that some people don't regret what they've done, only that they lost. Karen stopped showing her face publicly. Her clipboard army dissolved. The HOA board underwent a full restructuring, which felt less like politics and more like group therapy with legal pads. I didn't run for anything. I didn't need to. But they asked me to help rewrite the bylaws, to build a system that couldn't be twisted the way she had. So I did. And not for revenge. For permanence. We changed everything. No more anonymous complaints. No more surprise fines. All board decisions now required majority votes and community publication. We established a conflict resolution committee, a real one, with actual rotating members. And I created something new, a historical preservation clause. It passed unanimously. The tunnel, the land, and everything connected to its past would be protected, forever. The restoration work began slowly, cautiously. Structural engineers walked the site, their boots crunching on debris and dirt like archaeologists at a battlefield. One of them, a woman in her 60s, paused beside a collapsed slab of concrete and just stood there, hand over her mouth. "My grandfather helped build one like this in Montana," she whispered. "He used to tell me about the echo inside. Like it was talking back. We found that echo again. Cleared the debris. Reinforced the supports. Rewired what we could. Rebuilt where we had to. Every bolt, every brick, placed with respect. I spent weekends down there, dust in my lungs, palms raw from shoveling. But I didn't mind. Every scrape of the trowel was a restoration of something deeper than concrete. It was ritual. Memory. Grit given form. One morning, just before sunrise, I brought my grandmother to the site. The drawbridge-style gate had just been installed. Not historically accurate, maybe, but she laughed when she saw it. "Your grandfather would have loved the drama of that," she said, brushing her fingers over the new hinge. "He always said protection didn't have to be ugly. Just honest." We walked inside, and for a moment, we were just quiet. The place smelled of earth and steel and distant time. She touched the etched initials we'd uncovered in the wall, my grandfather's, scratched into the surface like he knew one day we'd need a reminder. "This tunnel was his anchor," she said. "No," I told her. "You were," she cried then. Not loudly. Just enough. The neighborhood changed. Maybe not overnight, but enough that you could feel it. Kids started playing in the streets again. Neighbors began organizing movie nights in the park. One guy even built a community pantry near the corner stop sign. "Take what you need. Leave what you can." It was weird. Good weird. I started getting invited to things. Dinners. Book clubs. One guy even asked if I wanted to coach his son's little league team. I said no, those kids are savages. But the best part? People started asking about the tunnel. And not just out of curiosity. They wanted to know what it meant. So we built something around it. Not just a bunker with a plaque. A community archive. A small shed, converted into a visitor center. Solar panels on the roof. Inside, old photos, blueprints, even a voice recording my grandfather once made describing the purpose of the ventilation system. A place to learn. To remember. To honor. It opened on Veterans Day. The mayor showed up. So did a local news crew. A few families from other towns even drove in just to walk the length of the tunnel and whisper through the thick stillness like they were speaking to ghosts. One reporter asked me, "What do you want people to take away from this?" I thought for a moment, then said, "That some things are worth protecting. Even if no one believes you at first. Even if it costs you peace, or time, or comfort." Karen moved. Quietly. No farewell post. No goodbye cookies. Just a listing on Zillow that dropped in price 3 times before a cash buyer finally took it. Rumor was, she left a single note behind. "Taped to the door." Said simply, "You win." But the thing is, it was never about winning. It was about enduring. She thought power was control. That if she bullied hard enough, she could erase anything that didn't fit her vision. But control fades. Legacy doesn't. And the tunnel, once forgotten, now stood as proof. Not just of history, but of resistance. Somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of it as my story. It became ours. Not just mine and my grandmother's. Not even just my grandfather's and the engineers who carved the tunnel into the earth. It belonged to all of us now. To the neighborhood, the town, the people who came to see it, who asked questions, brought their kids, told their own stories in return. The tunnel had stopped being a structure. It had become a memory with walls. On the 1-year anniversary of the day it collapsed, we held a small ceremony. Nothing extravagant, no speeches, no fireworks. Just a slow walk through the newly restored corridor. A few candles flickering in the entrance. A framed photo of my grandfather set on a small stand beside his old army cap. My grandmother wore the same brooch she wore at their wedding. Said she didn't plan to, but when she woke up that morning, it just felt right. The air was cool, still, and when I stepped inside, it didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like return. I was asked to speak. Just a few words. I kept it simple. Tunnels aren't built for light, I said. They're built for shelter. For safety. For holding something together when everything else is coming apart. And when someone tries to bury that, you don't just dig it back up. You reinforce it. You build it stronger. I paused, looked at my grandmother. And sometimes the strongest things we build are the ones we almost lose. That was all. That was enough. Weeks passed. The legal process continued, as these things always do, slow, frustrating, full of paperwork. Karen had been stripped of her board status, formally reprimanded by the county, and barred from holding leadership in any HOA again. The final ruling was poetic in its clarity. The defendant acted outside her jurisdiction and without regard for legally protected structures, and her actions constituted an abuse of perceived authority with lasting harm. She was fined. Not bankrupted. But hit hard enough to feel it. She appealed. It was denied. She tried to shift blame. No one listened. In the end, she left the state entirely. Someone said they spotted her in a Facebook group for HOA professionals in transition. I didn't follow up. There's no satisfaction in watching someone drown in their own arrogance. The real victory is when you stop needing to look back. What I do look back at, every now and then, is the mural. It was painted by a group of high schoolers during a summer art project. We gave them full access to the tunnel's exterior wall, the one that was exposed after the collapse. They designed it themselves. No one gave them rules. They wanted to tell a story. And what they made, it stunned me. It wasn't just tanks and bunkers. Not just blueprints and flags. It was people. A soldier carrying bricks. A woman holding a blueprint. A child crouched on the ground, tracing initials into concrete. At the very center, a house, simple, stone and ivy covered, with a figure in the window. Watching. Protecting. Sometimes I stand there in the morning, before anyone else arrives. The mural lit by early sunlight. The yard quiet. The tunnel open behind me like the mouth of memory. And I think about all the things we're told to forget. How quickly people are made to feel small. Disposable. Like they're just in the way of someone else's vision. But we're not disposable. And the past doesn't vanish just because it makes someone uncomfortable. I walk back toward the house. The air is clean. The soil has settled. My grandmother is on the porch, crossword in hand, tea cooling in the breeze. And me? I'm at peace. Not because we won. But because we endured. Because in the end, all she had was a clipboard and a grudge. And what we had was a tunnel. And stories? They go deeper than cement. They survive the collapse. They echo. And some echoes never fade. And that brings us to the end of this story. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very last moment. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing, it really helps the channel grow. I've also picked 2 more videos you might enjoy, so don't forget to check them out. See you again soon with a brand new story. Until next time.